Minute Math. When you need help, you use Minute Math.
I'm Sean Gann, and this is Minute Math. And today we're going to learn about dividing integers. We're going to find each quotient. 35 divided by -5. Okay? So what they're asking here is how many times can we put 5 or -5 into 35? Well, how many times just 5 goes into it? You might see it like this: 35 over 5, or 5 into 35. Well, how many times does that happen? Well, 5 goes into 35 7 times. Okay, now we know all these were negatives, right? So, when we divide by a negative number, we keep it in negative, and so 35 divided by -5 is a -7. -8 divided by 4. Okay, so they're asking us how many times does 4 go into -8? As a fraction, it looks like this: -8 over 4, or 4 going into -8. Okay, well, 4 goes into 8 2 times, right? 2 times evenly. 4 times 2 is 8. So our answer here is just going to be 2, but a negative divided by a positive is a negative. So we have a -2, and that is our final answer. -24 divided by +4. Okay? Now we might see this as a fraction, -24 over 4, or this way: 4 goes into -24, like it's long division. Okay? Well, we know 4 goes evenly into 24 6 times, right? 6 times 4 is 24, right? But a negative divided by a positive is a negative. So our final answer here is just a -6. -8 divided by -2. So -8 divided by -2. You might see this as a fraction: -8 over -2. Or, in long division form, -2 goes into -8. Okay? Either way, we really just focus on the whole numbers, not necessarily the negatives yet. 2 goes into 8. Well, how many times? 8 divided by 2, same question. That's going to be 4, right? 2 times 4 is 8. Okay, so now we have 4. Now we have to see if it's positive or negative. Well, we know a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So our final answer here is just a +4. 8 divided by 4. So we have 8 divided by 4 here. Okay, well, we can see this sometimes as a fraction, as 8 over 4, or 4 goes into 8 in long division. Okay? Either way, how many times does 4 go into 8? Well, that's going to be 2 times, right? So 2 times, right? 2 times 4 is 8. And a positive divided by a positive is a positive. So our final answer is just +2. -24 divided by 8. Okay? Now we might see this as a fraction: -24 over 8. Or in long division, 8 into -24. The way I look at this, I don't really worry about the positive and negative till the end. 24 divided by 8. How many times does 8 go into 24? That's going to be 3 times. 3 times 8 is 24. Okay, so now we have to deal with the negatives. Well, negative divided by a positive is a negative. So we have a -3 here. So our final answer here is just -3. -21 divided by 7. Okay? Now we might see this as a fraction: -21 divided by 7, or we might see it in long division. 7 goes into -21. Okay? Either way, I don't worry about the negative. I just think, okay, 7 goes into 21 how many times? Well, 7 times 3 is 21, so 7 goes into 21 3 times. Now I worry about the negative. A negative divided by a positive number is a negative number. So our final answer is just -3. 6 divided by -6. So we have 6 divided by -6. Now, we might see this as a fraction, like this: 6 divided by -6, or in long division, -6 goes into 6. All right? Well, I don't really worry about the negative right now, and I just think, well, 6 divided by 6. Any number divided by itself is always going to be 1. So we have 1 right here. Now, the second part is a positive number divided by a negative will always be a negative. So we have a negative 1. So our final answer here is just negative 1. Negative 132 divided by negative 11. Okay? Well, we might see this as a fraction, negative 132 over negative 11, or in long division, negative 11 goes into negative 132. Okay? Now this one isn't one that's commonly in our times tables, depends on how large your times tables are. But what we can do is long division here. 11 goes into 13 one time, right? 1 times 11 is 11. Subtract the 2 and ignore the negatives in there, right? 13 minus 11 is a 2, and then we bring down this 2. Now 11 goes into 22 2 times evenly. 2 times 11 is 22, and we get 0. So this actually comes out to be a 12. Now we have to worry about the negatives. Well, a negative divided by negative is a positive, so our final answer here is just positive 12. Negative 60 divided by negative 15. So we might see this as negative 60 over negative 15, or negative 15 that goes into negative 60. Okay? Well, we say, okay, 15 times what gives me 60, right? How many times does 15 go into 60? Well, 15 times 2 is 30, and 30 is half of 60. So that gives us 4 times 15 gives us 60. So 15 goes into 60 4 times. All right. Now we have a negative divided by a negative, which we know is a positive. All right. So our final answer is just 4. Negative 52 divided by negative 4. Okay. Well, that can be written also as a fraction. Negative 52 divided by negative 4, or long division. Negative 4, that goes into negative 52. Okay? Well, this one isn't necessarily a common times table, so let's go with our long division. 4, now we're going to ignore the negatives right now. 4 into 5 is 1. 1 times 4 is 4. Subtract the 2. 5 minus 4 is 1, and bring down the 2. Now 4 goes into 12 3 times. 3 times 4 is 12. And there we have it, 12 minus 12 being 0. So our answer is just a 13. But now I need to worry about the negatives, okay? We have a negative divided by a negative, which we know is going to be a positive. So our final answer here is just positive 13. 60 divided by 12, okay? So we have 60 divided by 12. Well, we can see that as a fraction, 60 over 12, or 12 goes into 60. But the same question is still there. How many times does 12 go into 60? That answer is going to be 5, right? You can think like this. 5 times 10 is 50, and 5 times 2 is 10. And 10 plus 50 is 60. So 5 is just our answer here. And we know it's a positive divided by a positive, which is a positive. So our final answer is just 5. 6 divided by negative 1. Well, we can write that as 6 over negative 1, or negative 1 goes into 6, all the same question. But it really is, how many times does 1 or negative 1 go into 6? I ignore the negatives right now and say, okay, well, 1 goes into 6 times. Any number divided by 1 is itself. So we have 6 here. But now we have a positive divided by a negative. Well, positive divided by a negative is a negative. So our answer here is just negative 6. 75 divided by 15. All right, so we have 75 divided by 15. Well, that's the same fraction as 75 over 15, or 15 into 75. Okay, so the question still remains is how many times does 15 go into 75? Well, if we don't know that off the top of our head, right, it's going to be kind of difficult, it takes some time there, all right? So what I like to do is say, okay, well, what about just kind of test multiplying numbers? 5. 5 times 15, well, what is that? Well, 15 I kind of break down to be a 10 and a 5. Okay, right? 15 is just 10 plus 5. Well, 10 times 5 is 50, and 5 times 5 is 25. 50 plus 25 is 75. So 5 is our answer here, right? 5, right? 75 divided by 15 is just 5. And a positive divided by a positive is a positive. So our final answer is just 5. 65 divided by negative 13. That's the same as a fraction, 65 over negative 13. And negative 13 goes into 65. Now this one's a little tricky, all right? If you don't know it off the top of your head, it can be fairly difficult. What I like to do is try to guess where I think it would be, right? And test that number out, okay? Well, negative 13 goes into 65, how many times, right? 1 of 5 times, let's say 10, number close to negative 13, is close to 65. So I'm going to test 5. 13 just times 5. Well, 5 times 3 is 15. Carry the 1. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. Right on the money there, right? Of course it is. I know I made the video, I know the answer, but still. Okay, it's the way I check at least. Okay, a good educated guess. So 5 is kind of the reverse answer of this multiplication. So 65 divided by 13 is just a 5, but we see it's a negative, right? So a positive divided by a negative is a negative, so we have a negative 5 there. And so negative 5's our final answer. 12 divided by 4. Okay, so we have 12 divided by 4. All right, well that's the same as a fraction, 12 over 4, or 4 that goes into 12. Okay, well still the same question remains. How many times does 4 go into 12? Well, you know that's actually 3, right? 3 times 4 is 12. So that's it, and a positive divided by a positive is just positive, so this is pretty easy. Positive 3 is our answer. Negative 168 divided by negative 12. Okay? Now we can see that also as a fraction of negative 168 over negative 12, or in long division form, negative 12 that goes into a negative 168. So this is one that most of us probably don't have off the top of our head. You might just know the answer. What I'm going to do is long division here. Now, I ignore the negatives while I do this, okay? And I worry about the negative at the end. 12 goes into 16 one time, and 1 times 12 is 12. Subtract the 2. Okay, 16 minus 12 is a 4, and I bring down the 8. Now we say, okay, how many times does 12 go into 48? Or what times 12 is 48? And that is just going to be a 4. 4 times 12 is 48. Subtract the 2, and we get a 0. Okay, so we're kind of done here. So we have a 14 is the basis, but now we have to worry about the negatives. A negative divided by a negative is always a positive, and so our final answer here is just a positive 14. Negative 8 divided by 2. So we have negative 8 divided by 2. Well, we can write this as a fraction, negative 8 over 2, okay? Or in long division, 2 that goes into negative 8. All of these have the same question. How many times does 2 go into negative 8? Well, 2 goes into positive 8, we know, 4 times, right? 4 times 2 is 8. And then we see a negative divided by a positive is a negative. So we have a negative 4. So our final answer here, pretty easy, negative 4. Negative 105 divided by 7, okay? Well, we know that's also the same thing as this, negative 105 divided by 7, or long division form, 7 goes into negative 105, okay? So for this one, I'm going to use long division here. 7 goes into 105, and I'm going to ignore the negative part, okay, for right now. Can't forget it at the end. 7 goes into 10 one time. 1 times 7, 7. Subtract the 2. 10 minus 7 is 3. Bring down the 5. Now 7 goes into 35 5 times, and that's actually evenly because 5 times 7 is 35. Subtract the 2, we got a 0, we're done. So 15 is so far the numerical answer, but we need to know if it's positive or negative. Well, a negative divided by a positive is always going to be a negative. So final answer here, negative 15. Negative 4 over a negative 1. Well, we can write that also as -4 divided by -1, or -1 goes into -4. Well, this one's actually pretty simple, okay? Ignore the negatives for right now. How many times does 1 go into 4? Well, 4, right? Any number divided by 1 is itself, okay? So 4 divided by 1 is just 4. And then now we deal with the negatives. Well, a negative divided by a negative is a positive, okay? And that will always be. So our final answer here, combining the two, is positive 4. -10 over a -2, okay? So we have -10 divided by -2. Another way to write that, -10 divided by -2, or -2 goes into -10. Either way, same question, okay? So for right now, I actually ignore the negatives and just think about 10 divided by 2. Well, 2 goes into 10 5 times, right? So 10 divided by 2 is just 5. But now I have some negatives to deal with. A negative divided by a negative, we always know, is a positive. So our final answer, combining the two, is a positive 5. -144 divided by 12. Well, we know that that's the same thing as writing it like this. 144 divided by 12. Or 12 goes into -144. Now you might have this memorized and think that it's just 12, which is fine, and you can get there, or -12 is our final answer, okay? Because 12 times 12 is 144. But let's go do some long division here. Ignore the negative. 12 goes into 14 one time. 1 times 12, 12. Subtract the 2. 14 minus 12 is 2. Bring down the 4, okay? So now we have, how many times does 12 go into 24? Well, that's 2 times, right? 2 times 12, 24. Subtract the 2, we get a 0. So we just have 12 here as our final answer, or almost final answer. Forgot the negatives, right? So a negative divided by a positive is always going to be a negative. So our final answer is just a -12. 24 over a -12. Okay? We can also write that as 24 divided by a -12, or in the long division form, -12 goes into 24. Okay? Now, if you can know this and see this, that half of 12, or half of 24 is 12, so 12 times 2 is 24, we know we have that. Okay? So that is just a 2. 24 divided by 12 is just a 2. But now we have these negatives to deal with. Okay? So a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So our final answer is just a -2. 60 over -15. We know we can write this as 60 divided by -15, or long division, -15 goes into 60. The same question is the same for all 3 of these, okay? What is 60 divided by -15? Well, first I ignore the negative, okay? And I think of it just as 60 divided by 15. Well, we know 15 times 2 is 30, and 30 is half of 60. So that comes out to be 4 times, right? 15 times 4 will end up being 60, and we can see that. 15 times 4. 5 times 4 is 20, carry the 2. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 2 is 6, 60. So 60 divided by 15 is just a 4. But now we have to deal with the negative. A positive divided by a negative is always going to be a negative. So our final answer is a -4.
Minute Math. When you need help, you use Minute Math. Minute Math. Minute Math. When you need help, you use Minute Math. MinuteMathTutor.com.